You're listening to Ask Your Ates, a Filipinx mental health podcast. I'm Michelle Mercado Martinez, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Cynthia Siadat. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And this podcast is for our Filipinx community, our kapatids, our adings, and younger us.
A little disclaimer. So the information contained on this podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and it's not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional mental health. This content is not intended to be a replacement for therapy, diagnosis, treatment, advice, or psychological care.
This podcast does not constitute a therapeutic relationship and is not implied to be professional mental health, medical, legal, or other advice. These platforms are intended to provide education about mental health, psychology, and general therapy information.
If you are in a crisis, please call 911 or visit your nearest emergency department. If you're not in immediate danger, but would like someone to speak with, you can reach the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255.
Lastly, the content of our conversations can be challenging, triggering, and at times downright upsetting. I think I speak for Michelle and I both as your ates, that we want you to give yourself permission to take care of you. If you find something is bothering you, a thought, feeling, or body sensation, go ahead and get up to take care of it. Drink water, use the restroom, take a nap, and come back later if you want to. We'll be here. Another important thing, it takes a village and we could not do this alone. We, your ates, acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrieleño, Tongva, and Luiseño peoples. We acknowledge the Gabrieleño, Tongva, and Luiseño peoples as the traditional land caretakers of the Los Angeles Basin, Southern Channel Islands, and Riverside County. We pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and our relatives, past, present, and emerging, and encourage all of our kapatid to visit tongva.land today to make a guest offering either one time or on a monthly basis. And if you're curious and want to know what native land you may be on to make an offering to those traditional caretakers, please visit native-land.ca. Welcome, kapatid. This is your ates Cynthia and Michelle. And today's podcast is about decolonization in relationship to mental health, a continuation of the conversation we started last episode. And we're going to get started with Michelle doing a grounding exercise for us. Michelle?
Okay. All right. So I want to invite everybody to sit comfortably and close your eyes. Place your feet firmly on the floor. Gently start to slow down your thoughts and allow them to come to a pause. Notice the rise and fall of your chest as you inhale and exhale. Allow yourself to welcome your ancestors into this space. Take a moment to honor those ancestors who have come before you, those who are still with you, and those whose memories have made lasting impact on you. Allow their faces to come to your mind. Allow yourself to experience the warmth of connection to and with them. Allow yourself to receive what your ancestors have always dreamed for you. Notice how they look at you with wonder. Notice how they surround you with care. Notice their strength. Connect to their knowing. Align yourself to the power of what has been passed down generation to generation. Though some of our ancestors were never able to fully access that power, this is where our turn starts. This is where the cycle changes. This is where our healing passes through us to heal down through our ancestral lines. Stand firmly in this knowing. And now I invite you to take a moment to reorient yourself, to get yourself grounded, and to be present with us and all of our parts as we get ready for this much needed discussion on decolonization.
One of the questions we wanted to talk about today of how some of our own experiences with the process of unlearning and decolonizing ourself has gone. And then maybe even because we have a question here around like how beginner decolonization mental health work could be. But I was talking to Michelle about like not wanting to be too prescriptive of like, this is what it looks like versus this is one example of what it looks like. Mm-hmm. And so I want to ask you, Michelle, like, to just continue to tell us about the experiences you've had of your own unlearning, decolonizing yourself or your practice or both. You know, sometimes those things happen parallel, but could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So I was reflecting on how I have like these two distinct phases of my life. The first phase was heavy on assimilation. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, but I want to differentiate that with like how it moved into decolonization. Mm-hmm. But what I learned from my assimilation phase was, you know, I'm thinking, it was around middle school where I was still feeling like some alignment with our community. Right. But I knew like I'm kind of different from like all of the other Filipinx at my school, but I still tried to belong because of course, you know, you want to belong. And I at least knew like, hey, they somewhat look like me more than somebody else. So I want to be able to be included and belong. Now, I think that what ended up happening for me is because I was different, and I'm going to describe what I mean by different. Like I'm a larger body person. So that in itself already set me so far apart from like the tiny little Filipinas.
The petite.
Right. Yeah. Like, that was not me. I was definitely not like the little one. And so, so I was like, okay, well, let me just try to fit in the other ways. And I was thinking back to middle school, like specifically, like I remember 8th grade, I wore the same shade of this Wet n Wild lipstick that all the other Filipinas had. I had my flannel. I had my Birkenstocks. I had all of these things. And I was like, okay, but I still felt different. And so then I looked at assimilation a little bit differently. And clearly, obviously, this is all retrospective, right? Because I wasn't that intentional as a child. And then I started to shift from middle school into high school. So do you remember Sun In?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my. Okay. So I was like, this is one of the ways that I'm going to be different because nobody else is dyeing their hair or lightening their hair. But, you know, so there was like the Sun In, and then I had green contacts. Like it was a thing. Oh, it was a thing. But I only had orange hair with green contacts. And what the like. It wasn't cute. Let me just say, I tried to make it work.
Oh, we thought it was. No, we thought it was cute.
It didn't work for me though. And so then I just like continued to differentiate myself from like my Filipinx community in place of assimilation, like with this idea of dominant culture. So I was the Filipina that like, I looked different. I dressed different. Like I moved away from the traditional style dress that like the other Filipinos were wearing. Cause honestly, I couldn't pull off a bodysuit. Like, you know, a bodysuit and flannel, like I couldn't do it. So what did I do? So I was like in my billabong and in my van and I listened to like punk music and I was like all about rock. And I was like, this is how I'm going to differentiate. But I mean, I'd still try to like have some joining, but I did notice that that's where the shift happened. And it's something that I was reflecting on last night because I was like, okay, so I was doing all of those things to try to assimilate, but what did it do to my mental health? It fucked me up, y'all.
Yeah.
So I was trying to take on this identity that I didn't really have full alignment of, because I thought that I would have belonging. So it's like, well, let me, like, at least from the physical perspective, try to fit in. Let me try to do something different. I didn't want to be othered within my own community, but how would it be any better to be othered from a different community? So I realized that this is actually like the height of where I was like, my social anxiety was so bad. I couldn't even enter into a store because I was like, oh my God, they're going to greet me. Don't look at me. Like I was a mess at that time. Right. But I didn't understand that it was the weight of assimilation, the weight of not being able to see us represented anywhere, the weight of trying to be something that I'm not. And I knew last night, I was like, ooh, teenage part, we're going to just hug through this because you were trying so hard. You weren't seen, wasn't seen by my family, wasn't seen by like people my age. So I'm just like, I'm so thankful that that part like had the will to survive it all, because that shit was intense.
Yeah. It's intense. No, I get that. I guess you brought me back with the sun in.
Right.
Like that. Like I would spray that shit in my hair and sit out in the backyard. Just like trying to get golden locks
it's like,
out of this.
You have such a lovely orange in your hair now.
I know, right? But I'm with you. Like I like similar trajectory, like middle school, very tied into the Filipinx community. Like we used to have like basketball games where there was like arroz caldo being served and like other rice dishes, you know, it was like alongside the hot dogs, you know, it was like that kind of like, it was all together. And I loved that. I thought that was wonderful. And then I had traumas related to relationships that had happened between me and my other friends who at the time, I mean, I knew we were Filipino, but, you know, we were consumers of, or I was a consumer of like mainstream TV.
Yeah.
So looking at TV, I was like not making the discerning idea that I don't look like them. They don't look like me, you know, because I was seeing like Caucasian, blonde, brunette people on the television screen. And I'd be like, yeah, I want to wear that thing that Jennifer Aniston wore. Like, you know, it's like, that's not a thing I've ever said, but it's like similar to that. I want to say like,
yeah.
You know, who did I really admire? Lindsay Lohan. I was really a fan of Lindsay Lohan. The reason why I was a fan of Lindsay Lohan was probably because she was like one of the first redheads I had ever seen.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, redhead and freckles and like just different. And like being different made me appreciate her. You know, it was like being different from the other mainstream stuff I was seeing. And that's also like, you know, even with like Lea Salonga being like somebody people talked about and I heard about, I loved singing karaoke songs of Lea Salonga songs and all those things, but I never saw her on TV. You know, I never saw her face. I never saw her. I only knew her voice kind of, you know, and definitely had some green or gray contacts. Went from sun in to dyeing my black hair black. Like, not like a brown black, but like a blue black. And that's how I justified that it was different. And I could tell you what I wore to my homecoming on in my freshman year of high school and my homecoming my senior year of high school. So homecoming, or like maybe it was just the fall dance because it wasn't quite dressy like homecoming can be. But I was in pleather pants and a pink shirt that said like princess or something on it. Like I was, and like decided I was hot shit and like danced on top of a speaker. Like that was me beginning high school. Okay. Long hair, like just feeling very Pinay, you know, like Bay Area Pinay, like feeling it.
Yes.
And then,
oh my God, I need to meet this version of Cynthia.
And then I will say, when I got to my senior year, there was some stuff with like looks around, and this is really tough because this actually just came up with my mom around like accepting our beauty as Filipinas. And I remember I was going to get a haircut, and like I got like a trim because I was like, I don't want to cut hella hair off. But I came back and she was like, cut more. Well, it was like, I paid for this thing, like cut more. I was like, that's too much for me to pay, and you only get a trim. So I go back in my bratty kind of teenager, I'm going to show you kind of mood. I chopped off like 6 inches of hair. Mm-hmm. And I had some spiky, almost like I had a spiky little, whatchamacallit, pixie cut. Mm-hmm. So spiky pixie cut for homecoming, and like a dress. Well, that's not really fair for me to compare it to that old version of me. So new version or senior year version would have worn brown corduroy pants, a green ribbed tank top, and orange, gray, and white Vans. Or not Vans. Oh, what is that? Etsy's? Etsy's. Etnies. You remember Etnies?
Etnies.
Yes, I had a pair of Etnies.
Yes.
I did not ride a skateboard. Excuse me. Sorry. And I love, sorry to my younger self. I just gave you some shit about the shoes and the clothes that you were wearing. But, yeah. I tried to differentiate myself from those folks that I was with by embracing other American quote unquote cultures. Yes. So like I got really into jazz music, which I love. I love jazz music still. I joined all the choirs, which was still pretty Filipino. I like only had, I don't know. I only had friends who skateboarded. I only had friends who were in bands. It was like that kind of, or in music with me somehow, and I would like that became part of the identity that I was working with. Mm-hmm. And this continued through college. And I think I'm with you. It was like the further away I got from my Filipino culture and community, I can see that downward slope into more and more depression, more and more, mm-hmm. Struggles with identity, because I went to college, joined the a cappella group, had a number of unfortunate and, just hurtful microaggression type of experiences there. And not to say like these people aren't good people, but that we were just not aware, like none of us were that. And then also like having a mistrust of the Filipino organization on campus. Mm-hmm. Like I would try to be part of it, but then I was also very guarded. And I think I was guarded because of the prior experiences I had had. And so I think particularly the sort of skin tone or appearance related stuff that came to a head when I went to Disneyland with a friend of mine, and it was for his birthday, and we went into like the Sephora on the Disney downtown area.
Downtown Disney? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was trying on bronzer. And he was like, "You got bronzer?" And he's a fairer skinned Asian man. But he was like, "You're trying on bronzer?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's cute. It's like sparkly and like whatever." At the time, I thought that's what contour was.
Yes,
I mean, I didn't know.
It was at one time.
Because it was. During that time, it was. And so I was like, "Yeah, I got it." And he was like, "I hate to break it to you. You're brown." And I was like, yeah. Like I knew it like intellectually. I knew intellectually I was brown. Mm-hmm. I knew that I was Filipino in my values and in how people generally saw me. But my identity as a brown woman at that point had been so separate and so disconnected that I think when he said, "You're brown," I was like, I know. But then I was also a little like, huh, thanks for telling me. It was a little mixed. So that was definitely a part of the like unlearning for me. And then also, related to like colorism in the Filipino community. Like I definitely was somebody who received those lightning soaps from family in the Philippines. So
that damn papaya soap.
Oh, fucking. And it burns. Yes. P.S. Fucking burns. It hurts. I did it like once and I was like, this is shitty. I won't do this.
So when I was a senior in high school, for graduation, my mom was like, do you want a nose job? And at that point, honestly, I didn't even have issues with my nose until she said that shit. And I was like, well, I know it's different, but what's wrong with it? How do you want to fix it? What are we talking? Why am I'm not even 18 and you want to get me a nose job?
I get it. Oh my God. That is what just came up with my mom. It just came up like yesterday. And Mom, if you're listening, I love you, but you need to cut it out. Like she texted me. I sent her a picture of me and my son. My son's a gorgeous little Filipino Arab Persian baby. Only 11 months old.
So cute.
So delicious. He is delicious. And he's like smiling. He's got like 6 teeth now. So it's like real cute and real like spunky looking. And the response I get from my mom is, oh, he's so cute. You know what? Every day when you wake up, pinch the bridge of his nose a little bit. Not hard, just gentle. And I had a flashback to my conversation with my mom when I was about 16 or so. We were sitting at Lingnam in Vallejo after church. And she's like, Cynthia, they're saying when you're rich, get a nose job. And like that shit stuck with me forever. I mean, like I love my nose. I think my nose is popping. I love it. But in my reaction, and me and my mom have talked about it and had our healing conversations over it. And she, on some level, understands and knows that that's not okay. But I'm pulling up my text with her. But she said that thing like, every morning wake up and pinch the bridge of his nose. And I was like, at first I got pissed. And then I collected myself to text her back and stand up for not just my son, but also for little me. And I texted her back and I was like, no, thank you. I'm going to let him grow how he grows. And then, and she was like, just the bridge. I did that to you guys when you were little. Just do it gently. And I was like, are you still going? And I wrote, his nose is perfect. And I hope you can still support him, whatever his nose or any other part of his body looks like. And she was like, of course. And then that was the end of that. But like, and by the way, I took that phrase. There is a woman, Hazel. Oh, I want to say it's all about Hayes on Instagram. Tita Selling gave me those words. It was like, I hope you can support me in this. So thank you. Shout out to Tita Selling and Hazel.
Yes, that accounts. Good. So good. So good.
Yes.
I always want the spicy. I want the spicy.
Are we going mild or spicy? I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
I love that.
I love it. I love that she's doing healthy Tita.
Because it's needed, right?
Needed.
Like, oh my gosh. So I had the nose thing.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I brought this up to my mom and she's like, I never said that to you. And I was like, do you want to see the notes from my therapist? Like, what the fuck? Like, what's it going to take for you to believe?
Do you want to see my bills?
I know. Right. But it's that. And then like, but it is also the titas that are like, ang taba, right? And it's like, oh, really? I had no idea that's what it looked like. Like, really? But I mean, and it was one of those things where
I giggle out of acknowledgement that I get it. You know, it's like, it's not funny. It's not funny. Like, it's like not kind. It's not funny. It's not a good joke ever. And I am having that laughter of recognition. Like, just, so me and my siblings are, you know, just naturally a bit bigger body wise. And there was a time in my life where I was around my family a little bit, and me and my elder sister, we were both like heavier set. And then I lost some weight and I was getting really thin. And my weight has been like a thing throughout my life. But my dad said to me one day, he's like, "Oh, you're looking good." It's like, "You're looking good. You know, for a while there, I thought you and your sister were having a competition." Oh. And I was like, "What?" Like, what are you talking about? And like, I was like, that is so rude. Like, what are you talking about? Come to later find out my dad lives with dementia and cancer. So like, there was like a filter that should have been there that wasn't that day. And I was like, whoa, that's really rude. I don't even remember what I responded with. I think I blocked everything out for the rest of that conversation. But yeah, just like commenting on somebody else's body, even positively, I think is just like, no go. We can't go there.
Yeah. And then what made it worse too is it was like, so if somebody did say, "Oh, whatever," bullshit. And if I got mad, oh, why are you mad?
It's like, it's like something's wrong with you there. It's like, no, I am mad because you said something offensive.
Yes. And it's like, oh, it's an endearing term. Not to me. Not to me. Not to me. Yeah. And, oh my goodness. And it was, it's one of those things where it's like, if ever there's a comment about my daughter's bodies, I'm like, yeah, they're healthy. We're keeping it at healthy. You know, there's sometimes comments like, oh, they're eating a lot of rice. It's like, they're healthy.
They're healthy.
Period.
Yes.
And if we want to add anything, we're going to add strong, but we're not going to do this bullshit of anything else.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Oh my gosh.
I don't really quite know how we got to here because
I know. No, I was just thinking like, I was just thinking like, this is a part of how colonization has affected mental health for us. Yeah. And our relationships and, you know, even how we approach our profession, you know, is like, you were sharing a bit about like, you know, having done the decolonization work on your business and then kind of transferring it to your personal. But I think I had a little bit of an opposite experience of like, again, I didn't call it decolonization, but I did know I was unlearning quite a bit around capitalism and patriarchy and just like having a very white mind, to quote Kuya EJR. Is just like, that was my brain. And so just understanding that and this really happened. I'm about to talk about my hospitalization in 2019, but this happened because I had been like at the height of what I would have told you my career was at that time. Like I had this goal of, I want to be a program manager and I want to have a private practice on the side. And I just want to be like a program manager inside of a mental health clinic. I got there, I was there, and I was doing it and feeling like I was doing it well for a long time, for like over a year or so, for maybe even a couple of years. I can't remember the time. And then a really upsetting thing happened at work. I was threatened. And then that sent my nervous system into chaos. And I couldn't like regulate myself. I couldn't manage to like help myself feel safe. You know, it's like I was almost like in a state of like, I'm always at risk. Like that part of me turned on. And it was getting to that point of like, I don't want to leave my house. Like that kind of, it was making me sick. And then I remembered something that a supervisor had once told me is like, if a job is making you sick, either physically or emotionally, it is time to leave that job. I went on medical leave so that I could tend to my mental health. And then like I did it for like 2 weeks, and then I came back to work, figured out that I was not well. And then I went back into medical leave for like another few months. And it just taught me, that whole experience taught me that I was at that point in my career, I was like making the most I had ever made in my life. But that taught me like there is no amount of money that will get me my mental health back. There is no amount of prestige that will get me my mental health back. There was no amount of like being the go-to person that would get me my mental health back. And so I feel like my process had been that, but personally is like learning how to give myself the things I needed instead of seeking something outside of me to get what I needed. And then I found that when I started to go fully into private practice, I found myself in a position where I was able to talk with people about letting their internal selves guide them versus all of this external shit that we're taught and we're shown and modeled, you know, is like that. Because I think I got to learn, you know, through my own pain and through my own experiences that was more valuable to me and to basically, I mean, like I've been working in private practice pretty full on since then. I had my private practice, but it was a small private practice like I had dreamed, you know, it was like I had 1 or 2 clients every now and again. But definitely afterwards, part of the work was education. So it's like helping people learn what feelings they were experiencing, and finding words to describe, even if it was like a metaphor for what they were feeling, so that they could kind of guide themselves. But yeah, that's how I've kind of found it entering into my work, entering in, and how that flow went for me. And it wasn't until like end of 2019, early 2020, when the pandemic hit, where I started to familiarize myself with decolonization. And the reason why it came up was because of this artist, Michaela Tobin. And she wrote this opera on Philippine mythology. And I had tried to do a podcast at that time. And I interviewed her. And she talked about decolonialization. And I was like, oh, I don't know what that is. Like, I mean, like, I know the term, like, but in terms of like indigenous peoples of the United States, but not in terms of like us as Filipinos. And so I really, you can hear my dog in the background. I really was like taken with the ideas. And that's when I started to familiarize myself. But that wasn't until later. But yeah.
I'm curious how gatekeeping has maybe been a part of your journey.
Let's see. Gatekeeping. I think I had it like, especially when Michaela first brought that idea to me, I was like, how did you learn this? What is this? How did you do that? And like, I think we were talking about it earlier, but just like, I had it like I needed to go through some kind of formalized training in order to understand what that meant. And so like, I felt like it became like like very true to capitalism and things that are in Western psychology. It's like very proprietary. It belongs to somebody. Somebody has claimed it and been the expert on it, for example. And like, that's not true. That part of the, like, that has been true in terms of my Westernized education, my Western training, all of those things has been in the, like, that, like, even that sounds colonial. Is like, I own this. It's mine. like versus like, it is ours. We share this. There's different versions of this with different people. And we don't know all the versions. Like, that's another part of the decolonization of my own mind and understanding, like, oh, there doesn't, like, when I think of gatekeepers, I think of like colonizing my mind to believe that somebody else needs to, one, give me access, or two, there's only certain people who have access to it or who can have access to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gatekeeping for me has been actually really challenging. And I'm thinking about like this in terms of the stuff that we've had to unlearn for ourselves, because I didn't actually know that I was under like the pressure of gatekeeping until I pulled back and really had to look at some of the intentionality of what I was experiencing. Because similar to like what you were saying, like, and we mentioned this earlier, this idea of formalized training in order to enter into a space, right? Or to like be able to hold any particular space. But I didn't really recognize for myself until more recently that it's like the way that I would learn things, and this is even for personal stuff, that I would have to read what somebody else has said about it to know about it before I checked in. And I was like, wait, what the fuck? Like, I really am checking in on how I'm feeling by reading somebody else's words. And that's how I was really like, oh my gosh, gatekeeping has just been so a part of my experience and something that I've really been trying to unlearn, that I couldn't even understand how ingrained all of it was already within me of like, oh, I'm feeling, so I'm just giving an example, like, oh, if I'm feeling anxiety, let me read about it. It's like, yeah. Wait a second. What? Right? Like, why do I need to hear another person explain the experience I know so deeply?
Yeah. Why do I need somebody else to explain my experience?
Exactly. And so I just didn't realize how deep that had run for me. And it was actually, that was one of the topics I was talking about with my therapist of like, like, that's when my righteous rage was really just like in full effect. It's like, can't stand gatekeeping. And then equally, I'm like, oh my gosh, but that's how I've learned to learn all of these things. What is really happening here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's like we learned there was right and wrong. We learned that there is like like ways that serve us, and there's ways that serve us less. And like, there's ways that don't serve us at all, and like, I think that kind of like right way, wrong way kind of stuff, talking about ways of learning, I think that kept me a lot of the time in academic settings or in professional settings, feeling like I had something to say, or feeling like I had space to like fumble over my words, or like I think the most often sort of internalized gatekeeper in my head says something along the lines of like, you just made that up.
Yep.
And I'm like, I mean, I literally didn't know this when I was born. Like, I mean, like, I didn't know the words to explain this to you. I learned these words. And like, I think I have more of like a fight, like like a talk back to that part of me. But I do think that that's still very much a part of when I do speak, like, I'm like, who am I? What am I saying? I just made that up. And then I realized, like, many of our, like, when we talk about white supremacy, I think about how white colleagues of mine will literally make things up at times. You know, and it's not, but I don't call it making it up when they say it. I call it pulling from their experiences and pulling from their knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's quote unquote making it up. You know, like and so I feel like that, I mean, I'm having this realization right now as I'm talking about it, I'll tell you, is like, oh, yeah, that's the alternative that I could share with myself, is like, no, I am pulling on my knowledge and I am pulling on my experience. I'm not just like saying whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good, because so I even think about, because it just brought me back into a space where it was like, when I am with other colleagues, and I should say that this has been my experience more so pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. When I was with my colleagues, there was such a need to not take space and not say anything, because I was deferring to them as the authority.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Even if they were freaking talking about Asians. I was like, what?
Like, hey, like, first of all, we're not a monolith. Second of all, I am part of that contingent of humans on this planet. And I could tell you from my own experience, part of the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just made me think of like the role that I actually had to put myself in, because when I started to challenge that role, one of the supervisors was like, it wasn't the actual words, but it was the tone of, why are you not being subservient like I know you to be? Why are you not, like, why are you questioning something that I'm still saying to you? Mm-hmm. And I remember like how much fear I had as a therapist starting. And then now I'm looking at like my experience with gatekeeping and how it's like there's still moments where I'm still taken to that freeze response of like, I have no words. I can't speak. I don't know what my experience is. What's happening?
Yeah.
Right. When it's like, even just thinking about those times is like, because this is like specifically when I was a new therapist. And it was like, everybody else had to say, I didn't get to have a say. I had a seat at the table. And for me, it was like, that should be enough, right? Because I have a seat at the table. But then that's also like the difference, right? Like, I don't know where I read this, but it was very significant. And it was like, but that's the difference with tolerance and inclusion, because tolerance will tell you, you just have a seat at the table and that's fine. Where inclusion is like, you have a seat at the table. Let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
And I never felt that in my professional spaces before, especially being like, I was the only Filipino therapist in however many group practices I was in. Right. And so then it was like, oh no, I'm just thankful to be here.
I'm just glad to be here.
The little person you think I'm supposed to show up as, and really fitting into that. But yes, gatekeeping and gatekeeping. That's what I wanted to ask you, because I know it's not one that we really planned, but
no, it's okay. I'm like you reminded me of like just certain instances as a young clinician being in the supervisee capacity to a white presenting supervisor, and how small that made me feel, and how scared I felt, and how inadequate I felt. And now I know that there were certain things that she had gotten to learn. Like, I'm thinking of somebody specific. There are certain things that she had gotten to learn that I had not even heard of yet. And that was just by virtue of her being who she was and me being who I was. But there was no, at that time, I mean, I'm thinking this is what, 2008, 8 when I started working with her. And I'm thinking like, oh, yeah, there was like no talk about this in that workplace. It was very, it's like, why aren't you doing the same as your white colleagues? And I noticed that the clinicians who tended to be the most, quote unquote, struggling were the clinicians of color. Mm. And I was thinking like, oh, that's interesting. But then I also knew, it's like, because we had our own little contingent, I also knew that clients were really responding well to the other clinicians of color. So I was like, I don't care. Like, even at that time, I don't think I would have said it this way, because I think I was still more embracing that like kind of subservient, like deferring role. Yes. But like, I did have a bit of pride around, like, I get that I'm not doing the thing that my white colleague is doing, but I am going to listen to the fact that my client is resonating with me and how I'm doing work with them. Mm-hmm. And, the clients, I was in San Francisco at the time, were predominantly brown and Black individuals. And so it just felt like I don't know, I didn't do it intentionally, but I definitely was like, well, I'm going to do what I think is right, or I feel is right, and then they'll correct me, is what I would say happened there. Looking back, I think that there was still, like, when I did what I thought was right, I think I still also felt the fear of being corrected or getting in trouble for doing the thing I thought was right.
Yes. So I think that would actually take us to a really big topic, but I'm kind of looking at our episode time.
Oh, yeah. I think we're good.
I'm wondering if we pick this up next episode, this idea, because I think it's a big one, the idea of fear and the way that and I want to look at this. Back up real quick, because I want to look at this idea of fear and what we were taught by our parents, parenting practices, and how that informed the rest of not the rest, but like parts of our decolonization practice.
Okay. Yep.
Does that sound good for you?
I'm writing it down so that I remember that is our topic next time.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm feeling my energy kind of winding down too. Like, I'm almost getting sleepy.
Time to resource.
So let's see. So shall we do just that minute of breathing that we did last time?
Yeah.
All right, kapatid, let's do this. So wherever you are, find a comfortable position. If that's seated, nice and comfortable, relaxed. If that's laying down, nice and comfortable, relaxed. And then find a comfortable position for your eyes. Options are closed or fixed on one single spot. We just don't want them to move around a whole lot. And for a full minute, you'll focus on the sound and sensation of your breath. And when you catch your focus wandering, I want you to gently pull your focus back to your breath. Your minute starts now. And time. All right.
We want to thank our community of support for this podcast. To Archie of Filipino Fridays podcast for her work editing and producing this much needed resource for our community. To Danny Martinez for creating our beautiful graphic, and Fahad Siadat for composing our wonderful music.
Thank you again for listening. We love and appreciate you all.